"24 new COVID-19 cases in the city, including 19 local infections." Beijing's National Security Office in Hong Kong officially opened in a Causeway Bay hotel building. And Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro tests positive for the new coronavirus.
Hello and a very good evening. Continuing yesterday's spike in COVID-19 cases, Hong Kong reported 19 new local infections. At least 8 new patients emerged from the care home cluster in Xiwanshan.
Alongside 5 imported cases from the Philippines, India and Kazakhstan, they bring the city's running tally to 1,323. Jacqueline reports.
A flurry of new cases that have caught even health authorities off guard.
We're not sure whether we can still contain the spread of these cases.
Warning of a third wave of infections, they believe the community still has a number of invisible carriers with unknown sources.
We are tracing all these contacts and sources, but it is expected that it will be difficult, and it's very likely that we cannot identify the sources of all these patients.
Among around a score of local infections, 6 are related to the clusters that emerged from 2 restaurants at Peng Shek Estate and Jordan. One of them worked in a sushi booth in a supermarket in Quarry Bay. The 14-year-old son of another infected patron from the restaurant clusters returned to school after contracting the virus. The school in Wong Tai Sin will be closed for 2 weeks. 5 others with unknown sources live in Peng Shek Estate, Qiwanshan, Chunwan, Mongkok, and Happy Valley. The care home cluster in Qiwanshan also reported at least 4 staff members and 4 residents coming down with COVID-19. The authorities said some staff members shared accommodation with workers from a neighboring care home. They will be tested for the virus. As case counts burgeon, health officials scrambled to evacuate the 30-odd residents out of the virus-stricken facility late into the night. They were sent to a quarantine center in Pak Fu Lam for medical surveillance. Jacqueline, TVB News.
Well, triggered by the sudden surge in coronavirus cases, authorities are considering implementing seating limits at restaurants again. Naomi Haralela tells us more.
I think it's time for us to tighten our social measures. But as for the extent of the tightening, I think it depends on the higher government decision.
And that decision remains unclear. Just last month, authorities lifted capacity limits for restaurants, as well as restrictions on the number of people at each table. One measure has remained intact, that customers still be kept at 1.5 meters apart. This restaurant operator in Wan Chai says businesses have just started to recover this month, but those improvements quickly diminished after the recent new infections. Mr. Chan said if more restaurant clusters emerge, people will be scared to dine out. He also called it a destructive attack to the dining industry. If the city reports more cases and seating limits, we'll revert back to 50% capacity. Still, the government and the catering industry are going ahead with a discount scheme for customers. More than 1,000 restaurants will be offering a 30% discount in July and a 20% savings in August. F&B sector lawmaker Tommy Chung also urged eateries not to let their guard down during these trying times, and that all staff should play their part in containing the virus. Naomi Haralila, TVB News.
On to other news now, and a Causeway Bay hotel has transformed into a temporary site for Beijing's new National Security Office here in Hong Kong.
Kena Chiu has more about its opening ceremony this morning.
A state-owned group, Metro Park Hotel Causeway Bay, has become the temporary base of the central government's National Security Agency. It's Beijing's 4th office in the SAR. The institution is tasked to oversee the implementation of the contentious national security law. The legislation came into effect last week, just 1 hour before the 23rd anniversary of the city's handover from British rule back to China.
揭牌。
Marking the inauguration of the new office at 7 a.m., Chief Executive Carrie Lam and two of her predecessors unveiled a plaque bearing its name. They were joined by Luo Huining, director of Beijing's liaison office in the city, and Zheng Yanxiong, who will take helm of the powerful agency.
在维护国家安全事务方面的
In her address to guests comprised of a host of dignitaries, the city's leader called the agency an important partner in Hong Kong's endeavor to safeguard national security. She also called the enactment of the national security law at a state level China's insistence on upholding and refining the one country, two systems principle. Under the sweeping new law, Carrie Lam would chair a national security committee and convene meetings under the close watch of its Beijing-appointed advisor, Luo Huining.
严格依法履行。
Speaking of the law, Luo slammed troublemakers with ulterior motives for stigmatizing the office and smearing the legal system and rule of law in China in an attempt to stir up unnecessary worries and fears among the public.
坚决依照法律规定。
Zheng Yanxiong, who heads the new office, said the agency will strictly abide by local laws and fulfilling its duties. He is assisted in his work by two deputies with security-related official backgrounds. Making their first appearance since appointment, the trio also includes Sun Qingye and Li Jiangzhou. Kana Chu, TVB News.
Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has tested positive for COVID-19 after consistently dismissing the seriousness of the pandemic.
He is also now taking hydroxychloroquine to combat the illness, an unproven treatment which is also favored by US President Donald Trump. Leslie Tang has more.
After months of mingling with crowds and appearing in public without a mask, Brazil's president has tested positive for COVID-19. He has often dismissed the deadly virus as a little flu. He later released a video showing him taking hydroxychloroquine, which is not proven to be effective against COVID-19 and has also been favored by U.S. President Donald Trump. Bolsonaro's positive test is likely to set off frantic tracing and testing among those who have come into contact with him recently. One of them is U.S. Ambassador Todd Chapman during July 4th celebrations. Neither wore masks in photos together. World Health Organization officials said this should serve as a reality check.
We're all potentially exposed to this virus. The virus doesn't really know who we are, whether we're prince or pauper. We're equally vulnerable.
Brazil has emerged as a virus hotspot, only second to the U.S. in terms of the number of cases and deaths. More than 65,000 Brazilians have died and over 1.6 million infected. Leslie Tang, TVB News.
Well, the World Health Organization acknowledged evidence emerging of the airborne spread of the novel coronavirus. That information will be included in an upcoming report summarizing modes of transmission of the virus, which could affect advice on social distancing.
What is a concern is the fact that the disease numbers are increasing day by day. And if you imagine that somewhere in April and May, we were dealing with 100,000 cases a day, today we're dealing with 200,000 cases a day. And that is not purely as a result of testing. This epidemic is accelerating, and we're lucky. I hope part of it is that we've become better, and there is a difference between being good and being lucky.
In Australia, 134 of the new cases reported this morning came from the city of Melbourne, which is preparing for another lockdown. 75 infections are linked to 9 public housing buildings, where about 3,000 people are already in lockdown. Police have also started patrolling the state borders between Victoria, which Melbourne is the capital, and New South Wales. The boundary between the two regions will shut for the first time in a century because of a spike in infections over the past week.
The Trump administration has sent a letter giving the United Nations a one-year notice for the U.S. to quit the World Health Organization. For months, Trump has been highly critical of the WHO, blaming it for being too slow to react to the pandemic and bowing to Chinese influence. The move was blasted by health officials and critics of the Trump administration. China says the act will undermine international efforts and will have grave implications for developing countries. The U.S. is the largest backer of the WHO, contributing about $450 million annually.
Coronavirus cases continue to rise in hotspots across the United States following the 4th of July weekend. Beaches in Miami-Dade County reopened on Tuesday after a temporary closure over the holiday weekend. Florida confirmed more than 7,000 new cases from Tuesday and 63 more deaths. A coronavirus outbreak has closed California's Capitol building. The closure has indefinitely delayed lawmakers returning to work from a scheduled summer recess. At least 5 people who work in the state assembly have tested positive for COVID-19. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump is pushing local officials to reopen schools in the fall, claiming some are staying shut for political reasons. Education labor unions are slamming his views. Meanwhile, American and foreign university students are blasting new federal guidelines that say international students will have to leave the U.S. or transfer to another college if their schools offer classes entirely online this fall. The guidelines put more pressure on campuses to reopen. This comes amid growing concerns about the recent spread of COVID-19 among young adults. Some students see this new policy as a xenophobic attack on immigrants by President Donald Trump. Dozens of colleges have said they plan to offer at least some classes in person this fall.
Still to come on tonight's news. The FBI chief says nearly half of the agency's 5,000 active counterintelligence cases are China-related. Electrical probe concludes lawmaker Ted Hui should be censured over a 2018 phone snatching incident. And the High Court declares the king of judicial reviews bankrupt. Welcome back to TVB News. The FBI chief is warning U.S. residents with ties and family in China to seek help from law enforcement if they feel they are being coerced by Chinese officials to return to their country of origin.
Christopher Wray condemned Beijing's attempt to pressure the Chinese diaspora. He also said China's global espionage is the greatest threat to America's economic security. Officials from the Trump administration, the U.S. government and American law enforcement have been doubling down in their attacks and criticism of China this year. In a speech about the security threat posed by Beijing, the head of the FBI talked about the challenges his bureau faced.
We've now reached the point where the FBI is opening a new China-related counterintelligence case about every 10 hours. And at this very moment, China is working to compromise American healthcare organizations, pharmaceutical companies, and academic institutions conducting essential COVID-19 research.
Wray also urged China-born people in the United States to contact the FBI if Chinese officials try to force them to return to China under a program of coercion that he says is led by President Xi Jinping.
Fox Hunt is a sweeping bid by General Secretary Xi to target Chinese nationals whom he sees as threats and who live outside of China, across the world. We're talking about political rivals, dissidents, and critics seeking to expose China's extensive human rights violations. Hundreds of these Fox Hunt victims that they target live right here in the United States, and many are American citizens or green card holders.
Wray says Beijing is using espionage, cyber theft, blackmail and other means as part of a strategy to topple the United States as the world's dominant power.
China is engaged in a whole-of-state effort to become the world's only superpower by any means necessary. The stakes could not be higher, and the potential economic harm to American businesses and the economy as a whole almost defies calculation.
Beijing has denied previous US charges that it employs cyber espionage against the United States.
As heavy downpours continued to batter the Chinese mainland, the country has issued the orange alert for rainstorm for the first time this year. That's the second highest alert in the national emergency response level. The rainstorm not only triggered landslides, but also disrupted the National University entrance exam. As schools were inundated, some students were shuttled by rescue workers to special exam centers that are not affected by floods.
Back locally, a LegCo probe has decided that lawmaker Ted Hui will face a censure of misbehavior for his phone snatching incident back in 2018. In a separate case, another LegCo committee exempted Holden Chow over allegations he conspired with former CE Leung Cheng-ying. Dong Yao-nie has more.
Democratic Party lawmaker Ted Hui is facing more fallout from a phone snatching incident in April 2018. During a LegCo meeting on a checkpoint plan for the West Kowloon high-speed rail terminus, the lawmaker grabbed a female Security Bureau officer's phone and documents in the LegCo complex. An investigation committee headed by lawmaker Alice Mack concluded he should be censured for misbehavior based on evidence from 3 witnesses. The panel found that Hui ran into the restroom despite the officer following him and demanding back her items. He later admitted to browsing the officer's phone in the toilet. The panel found Hui's behavior abhorrent, which brought discredit to the LegCo.
He has conducted himself in a way that has placed himself in a position which may be contrary to the generally assumed standard of conduct expected of a LegCo member.
Hui was convicted of common assault and 2 other offenses last year. Hui explained his actions.
This incident arises from the government sends paparazzi stalking legislators' whereabouts with an aim to intervene into the operation of our legislature.
Meanwhile, another LegCo probe exempted pro-Beijing lawmaker Holden Chow from censure. He was accused of conspiring with foreign chief executive Leung Cheng-ying of interfering with an investigation against the then SAR leader. The different outcomes of the 2 LegCo probes prompted complaints from pan-democratic lawmakers.
The difference in the standard that the pro-establishment members decided to adopt is regrettable.
Under the Basic Law, Ted Hui will be disqualified if 2/3 of LegCo members back the censure motion. With less than 2 weeks left in the current LegCo term, it's unlikely the body will have time to discuss the matter before the summer hiatus. Dong Yao-nie, TVB News.
Starting July 1st, new civil service recruits may be required to pledge allegiance to the SAR and declare that they'll uphold the Basic Law. In a document submitted to the Legislative Council, the Civil Service Bureau listed its proposal for the oath-taking of civil servants. Existing civil servants will have to make such pledges as well, but this will be done in stages. Officials of higher ranks or have sensitive duties are recommended to give their undertaking first. They include administrative officers, information officers, legal officers, and disciplined services staff. Civil servants who are set for promotion will have to do the same.
The High Court declared retired civil servant Kwok Chuk-kin bankrupt. Dubbed the king of judicial reviews, Kwok often challenged the legality of government policies and decisions. But he owes the government more than $1.56 million in legal fees over 4 failed judicial review attempts. The Department of Justice filed for bankruptcy against Kwok in May. The High Court held a hearing over the case today, and Kwok did not show up. The court declared Kwok bankrupt after reading documents submitted by the Department of Justice.
That's the news. Thanks for watching.
Bye for now. Good night.